Ah, Your Majesty. Tending to your weapon, I see. My apologies for interrupting you.
It's all right. I just finished. Is there something you need, Rodrigue?
Yes, in fact. I received this from Matthias when I was in Gautier territory the other day.
From the Margrave? But this sword is...
He said he borrowed it from Lambert years ago, and had long since forgotten about it. What sort of laggard keeps a loan so long he has to return it to the lender's son? 30 years!
That would have been around the time you all attended the Officers' Academy together, correct? Would you mind telling me the story of this sword?
It started when our class was given a mission to eradicate a bandit encampment. Foolish as I was at the time, I dashed in ahead of the others, leaving me and my entire unit stranded behind enemy lines. Apparently, your father and Matthias started arguing about whether or not it was worth coming to save me. Broke out into a full-on fistfight before long.
That's a surprise. I wouldn't have expected that of my father, much less the Margrave.
Well, they were both pretty feisty in their day. Neither of them wanted to back down, I'm sure. On one hand, you had Matthias, insisting they wait for aid from the church. Supplies were running low, so charging in could have gotten everyone killed. On the other, Lambert was so determined to come to our rescue, he'd have gone all by himself if he had to. No idea whose plan won in the end, sadly. All I know is they fought their way through the enemy lines together. And lucky for me, they found us before the bandits did.
So, my father tended to charge in recklessly as well. Or perhaps he was just naive in his youth.
Story goes, Matthias's lance broke while they were fighting their way toward us, so Lambert lent him this sword. As he was giving it to me, he couldn't help but laugh about how it slipped his mind for all these years.
Considering what I know of the Margrave, I have my doubts that he actually forgot it at all.
You're probably right. This is just my opinion, but I don't think he ever really managed to accept Lambert's death until you ascended the throne.
Perhaps. In any case, please tell him I've received it. And thank you for relaying that story to me. It seems even in his youth, my father was willing to do whatever it took to see those close to him safe. Yet here I've gone and started a war, knowing full well it will hurt those I care about most. He'd likely call me a fool if he were here today.
I'm not so sure about that. Yes, he did treasure his friends. But I don't think he would have been too keen on abandoning the church either, considering all they've done to protect the people of Fargus.
Rodrigue, you knew my father well. Could I ask you to do something for me? If I ever attempt anything that would bring shame to his name, please.
Say no more. I'll stop you, even if I have to lay down my life to do it. I already promised him the same thing, actually.
You have my deepest thanks. Do you have a moment, Rodrigue? There's something I'd like to ask you.
Anything for you, Your Majesty. What is it?
I want to hear your side of the story.
Of which story exactly?
How did you feel when you learned of my father's death? I've struggled to ask this before, but I want to know.
So that's what you mean. Honestly, I had a difficult time believing it at first. But as moons passed, I gradually grew to accept the reality of it. And of course, I recalled the promise I'd made him, and vowed to myself that I would carry it out.
I wonder then, Had I died alongside my father and Glenn in Dusker, what would you have done? You know, a fleeting thought flashes across my mind every time I see you reflect upon my father. It feels as though you aspired not just to stand beside him in life, but to meet death with him as well.
Don't overthink it, Your Majesty. I'm a pretty stubborn guy, you know. No, I didn't wish for my own death when Lambert passed. But sometimes I think that if I have to die to honor my promise to him, I would be satisfied with that.
I won't allow you to throw your life away, Rodrigue. I'll not have you stolen from me by that promise. Losing you would be almost like losing my father for a second time. If you were to die because of me, it would destroy me.
You may say that, but a subject lives by the example their king sets for them. And I know well enough that you don't value your life either. So if you'd like me to place more importance on my life, I urge you to do the same, Your Majesty.
You're right. I have no excuse.
No, I should apologize. That came out rather more harsh than I intended. You sounded so much like Lambert just now, I simply couldn't hold myself back. In truth, that's something I've wished I could have said to him for a long time now. Yet, you were the one who had to bear the brunt of it. I suppose I can hardly poke fun at Matthias for holding on to that sword all those years, can I?
I sounded like my father?
Indeed you did. Remember the story of the sword? About how I got stuck behind enemy lines like a fool? Well, the first thing Lambert said after he broke through their forces was, "Don't throw your life away like that." Not that it was too convincing coming from a guy covered in cuts and scrapes.
I can't imagine. It sounds as though you two were very close. I envy him for having such strong bonds with his friends.
Don't let my son catch you saying that, but he's sure he'd take offense. Anyway, that's enough reminiscing for one day. How about you try squeezing some memories out of Matthias next time?
A fine idea. Perhaps I'll invite Sylvain and the others to join in as well.
Hey.
What kind of greeting is that? I gave you my title, not free license for insolence.
Spare me the lecture. I have a question about the lords of Southern Fraldaria's territory.
So you're having trouble with them as well, are you? Let me guess. They're withholding provisions. Or perhaps they refuse to send troops they promised.
How did you know?
Because I've been through the same thing with them any number of times.
Southern soldiers are unskilled, but they make up for it with sheer numbers. I need their cooperation, yet they refuse to negotiate, and I have no idea how to convince them.
Yes. I imagine they're dealing with their own issues.
And what issues would those be?
When they refused to send reinforcements for the invasion of Sreng, it was because the lords were embroiled in a succession dispute. If one house sent soldiers, the others would pounce on the opportunity to move against them. But mere letters could never have told you something like that.
So you went around to each territory personally?
Yes. Though considering we're presently on war footing, doing so now would be unwise.
Well, that's hardly helpful, but I'll take it into consideration and see what I can do. Something funny?
Just thinking that you've grown into a fine duke.
Were you expecting me to fail? You're the one who gave me the title, after all.
True. But I inherited the role when I was much older than you. You're doing extremely well for your age. It seems I raised two very capable sons.
Don't tell me you're glorifying Glenn's death again.
Felix.
I've been walking in your footsteps, serving our king and leading an army of knights. After all that, I thought maybe I'd come to understand you a bit better. But I still can't stomach what you said that day.
Looks like I overstepped yet again. Perhaps the two of us will never see eye to eye. If Glenn were alive, I half suspect he'd say I was being childish. Sit down, Felix.
Can we make this quick? I'm busy.
For once, would you please just... No, not today. The truth is, I think it's time we sat down and talked. Neither of us know which day could be our last, so we should both ensure there's no lingering regret when the time comes.
Well, this is off to a grim start. So, what is it you want to talk about?
I wanted to apologize for what I said about Glenn. It was ill put, and I'm sorry. I should never have said such a thing in your presence.
If you're going to explain yourself, I suppose I can make the time to hear you out.
Thank you. Then I will not mince words. I too was mortified by Glenn's death. Yet he perished a hero. He chose that life for himself, and he chose that death. He fought to protect the future of Fargus and his friend until his dying breath. As his father, I felt I had to acknowledge that choice.
And how are you so sure it was his choice? Neither of us really knows what he was thinking. The boar might have an inkling, but all he goes on about is how he caused Glenn's death.
You're right. I don't know for certain. But I know what I would have done had I been there. And you, Felix, what would your choice have been? Would you have abandoned His Majesty to save yourself? Or would you have chosen to fight until death claimed you? I myself would have safeguarded His Majesty at all costs. I know that it wasn't in Glenn's nature to flee either.
It's always about courage or cowardice with you. I wouldn't have chosen anything. When your life's on the line, you don't have time to think about that stuff. Only act. I would have fought with my own will, in whatever way I thought best. And I would have made sure we both survived.
You always want to have it both ways. Still, I take pride in that determination of yours. Had I been there, I doubt I could have summoned the resolve to strive for such a victory. More likely, I would have been satisfied merely to die in the defense of my liege.
I can understand that way of thinking. In fact, I always have. But I still couldn't stomach Glenn's death being glorified.
And I'm sorry for that, Felix. Truly.
It's all right. And I'm glad we talked. Also, you said we shouldn't leave regrets behind, so... I'm sorry, too. For hitting you back then, I mean. I'm sorry, Father.
You know, I'd almost forgotten about that. It hurt, too. More than any blow I've received in battle.
Oh, shut up. I said I was sorry. Now, if we're done here, I'm leaving.
I have exhausted most of the Pegasus Corps, so how should I advance the mounted units on the ground?
A tricky proposition indeed. The enemy general won't be foolish enough to miss a chance to seize the advantage here.
If we are going to face the enemy with our remaining troops, it would be best to have the mounted units take up formation in the narrow pass to the east. Then, the remaining Pegasus Knights can attack from the cliffs above and end this quickly. Still, my scouts claim there may be archers stationed on those cliff tops.
Naturally. Everyone knows to expect Pegasus Knights as soon as they see the standard of Galatea. The enemy will doubtless be ready for this.
Yes, it is quite the predicament. I cannot help but wonder what my father or brothers would do. As someone who commands an army of Galatea, withdrawal is not an option.
I don't think you need to rack your brain over this too hard, Ingrid.
But if we fight without any sort of strategy, we will suffer major casualties.
Which might prove to be in your favor. If the enemy sees your back to the wall, they may let their guard down and grow reckless. How many Pegasus Knights stand ready?
Nearly half. Perhaps more if their wounds can heal in time.
Then select the most skilled from among them and make for the cliff tops.
And fly into the jaws of their trap?
While using the speed of the Pegasi to minimize injury, make it look like you're taking a desperate retreat. Then withdraw your troops. If the enemy thinks they've subdued the famed Pegasus Knights of Galatea, they'll deploy troops from their main fortress, leaving it lightly guarded. Once they do, send a separate unit of your remaining Pegasus Knights to capture it.
Yes, that just might work. You are amazing, Lord Rodrigue. I suppose this comes from your wide range of experience.
Actually, it's a strategy suggested by your brother once upon a time.
My brother? Oh, that's right. I believe he served in Srang while he was still a squire.
Despite his low rank, he astonished us all with his clever suggestions for deploying our flying units.
I have a long way to go if I wish to live up to him. I must prove more diligent about studying strategy.
Very ambitious. My son could stand to learn a thing or two from your example. But you ought not overextend yourself. Make certain to rest those wings every once in a while. I wouldn't be able to face the Count or your brothers if I allowed you to work yourself to exhaustion.
Resting my wings is a rather difficult proposition. I can't very well run about playing games as I did when I was a child. In any case, I thank you very much for the advice. I think I know how to proceed now.
The pleasure is mine, Ingrid. This is a most dangerous strategy, so let's endeavor to make sure we both come out of this alive. Ah, you're back. I heard you went to Fraldaria's territory?
Yes, I had a bit of business to take care of there. I forgot how long it had been.
What was it like to return?
It was always like a second home to me in a way, so being there brought memories flooding back. I found myself taking little detours everywhere, even though I knew I did not have time for such trifles.
And what impression did it give in its current state?
The region itself is quiet and peaceful, but lack of food has left the surrounding towns and villages in a precarious situation. It reminds me of when the people of Galatea territory fought over provisions during famine. If things keep on as they are, there could easily be an uprising.
Perhaps we should ask the refugees to cultivate the land. But that isn't my decision to make. Thank you, Ingrid. I will let Felix know your thoughts on the matter.
I would appreciate that. Oh, and it's not as if everything has changed for the worse. There were new shops around, and all of the roads were well maintained. It's surprising to see how much has changed over the years.
That's right. You used to visit multiple times a year, when Glenn was still alive.
I did, yes. Though I might never have visited again if I had not been presented with this opportunity. I am glad I decided to take it. Once this war is over, would you mind if I came to visit Fraldarius land as I once did?
Not in the slightest. You can visit anytime you like. I'm sure that Felix and the rest of my family would welcome you with open arms. We certainly owe you that much, considering all you've put up with from my sons.
Not at all. If anything, they put up with me. My brothers are both so much older than me, so Glenn and Felix were among my few friends growing up. Thinking back on it, I feel like I was always ordering Glenn around.
Well, if the time you two spent together helped you in even the smallest way, I am satisfied. And I know Glenn would be overjoyed.
Those days are irreplaceable to me. They will live in my heart forever.
Spoken like a true daughter of Count Galatea. You've grown strong, Ingrid.
Thank you for saying so. Still, I want to keep moving forward as best I can.
Yet it's good to acknowledge one's limits. People are allowed to show weakness, you know. Oh, look at me, talking your ear off while you're still covered with dust from the road. My apologies.
No, I am grateful for the concern. Thank you.
There's no need for thanks. After all, you're like a daughter to me. Well, if it isn't our mercenary friend, I trust you've adjusted to life in the kingdom by now.
Yeah, more or less. I've been here a few times before on the job, so it's not too big a shock. But I've never lived as far north as Ferdiad. There's still a bunch I need to get used to. Stuff like the wind blowing straight through you, or how it's always so stupidly cold, even inside, or how you can't go out after a blizzard. It snowed so much one night that I couldn't even open the door in the morning. Thought I was off to meet the goddess that day.
An amusing enough story when you tell it like that. But Fargus winters are no joke. They're harsh, unforgiving beasts. Tell me, have you grown to despise the cold?
Oh, it's miserable. Bet I'm not the only person who thinks that way either, seeing how much it snows. I honestly used to think it was some kind of beautiful magic when I was a kid, but I realize now just how rough the stuff can be.
To be frank, I'm not fond of the snow myself. Not to mention the countless lives we've lost to the bitter chill of winter. Nevertheless, this brutal tundra is the only home we have. Meaning there's nothing to do but adapt, persevere, and enjoy the lives we've built here.
Adapt? Like how the messengers ride Pegasi instead of horses during the winter?
Exactly. The sight of those majestic creatures soaring through the frost-ridden sky is one unique to Fargus. No matter how much snow blankets the ground, our Pegasi quite literally rise to the occasion. When my son and His Majesty were still just boys, they followed one off into the frigid mountains of all places. By the time I found them, they were but two shivering masses on the ground. For a moment, I thought my heart would never beat again.
So Felix has been getting into trouble ever since he was a kid, huh?
His penchant for danger is unchanged, yes. Though I fear his disposition has grown far sharper. The hardships of becoming Duke at his age are undoubtedly weighing upon his mind.
I don't know. I don't think you need to worry about him. He can take care of himself just fine.
A fair point. Perhaps it's time I let him spread his wings like the Pegasus he chased all those years ago. It seems the coming winter will bring more than just cold to Fargus. The ravages of war approach on the same wind. Training in such conditions will be a struggle indeed, but we cannot afford to ignore the looming Srang threat either. Managing our territories through it all will not be an easy task. But I have faith we will adapt, persevere, and overcome, just as we always have.
Next winter, huh? We'll just have to do whatever it takes to make sure the war's over by then. Hey, Rodrigue, you got a sec?
What's the matter? You look troubled.
Well, we ended up spending most of this winter out on the battlefield. So I was thinking if we put an end to the war before next winter rolls around, maybe we could all go back north and...
And? Speak plainly.
I want to have a snowball fight. Dimitri said that's how all the kids in Fargus play during the winter. Figure it would be good to try at least once now that I'm living here in the kingdom.
Ha ha ha! Yes, a fine idea. The sport's rather profound, if I do say so myself. Dividing into factions and formulating strategies makes it just as much a battle of minds as it does one of hurled snow.
Hold on, strategy? This sounds kinda intense for a kid's game.
It is. When we were still in the throes of our youth, Lambert, Matthias, and I faced off in such a contest. With our squires in tow, we traveled to the northern mountains to do battle.
Hey, that sounds like fun. So what happened?
I was the first to fall. I hid in the shadows, biding my time and observing the enemy's movements until the moment was right to strike. And yet, such an opportunity never came. While his subordinates fought freely in the open, His Majesty launched a surprise attack on my position. Unfortunately, my men and I were unable to land even a single blow on him. Our defeat was a matter of course.
Now I know where Dimitri gets his tendency to rush into battle alone. Like father, like son, huh?
Indeed. Still, it's difficult to feel wronged when you've been defeated in such a swift and skillful manner. My downfall left only Lambert and the Margrave, a man notorious for his rotten character even as a child. His strategy was not to attack outright, but to prepare an ambush for His Majesty in one of the more densely wooded groves.
Seriously? All that for just a snowball fight? No wonder Sylvain is so cunning. Anyway, what happened next?
We were all familiar with Matthias's ignoble tactics, so His Majesty was careful to avoid the cowardly ambush which had been laid for him. At last, just as the opposing generals were staring each other down, Gunnar, the current Count Galatea and noble, many years our senior, emerged from the wood to put a stop to it. In the end, our final showdown that day was between his hands and the scruffs of our necks, all while our ears rang with his dire warnings about the mountains.
That sounds like Ingrid's dad, all right. Guess that means nobody won, huh?
Yes, the story dates back several decades, but I still remember it as if we were trudging through the snow only yesterday. Say, if you do end up mustering an army for one of these snowball battles, I would be honored to observe, should you have me.
Why don't you join us? As one of the combatants, I mean. I'm sure Dimitri and the Margrave won't mind. You won't be facing the same opponents, but maybe then you'll finally settle the score. For old time's sake.
A sound point. Very well. I'd be thrilled to partake when the time comes. You know, of late I've been dreading the coming winter, but now I feel I may actually look forward to it.
Hey, Rodrigue. Looking for something specific?
I am. It's a book called Keyhole's General Treatise on Mercenaries. I was hoping to brush up a bit.
Sounds familiar. Pretty sure I skimmed through it back at the academy. Are you gonna use it for the next campaign or something?
Well, perhaps.
Rodrigue, is everything okay? You're not really the kind of guy to skirt around answers like that.
If I may, do you remember when we faced Gerald and his mercenaries in battle?
How could I forget? Things got pretty intense out there.
Indeed they did. And that battle is the reason they opted to join our cause. One mistake is all it would have taken for us to suffer a crushing defeat. Thankfully, we managed to seize the initiative ourselves and emerge victorious. Had we not, our main camp would surely have fallen. I expect I too would have lost my life in the fray.
Yeah, it felt like there was danger lurking around every corner. Almost like I was walking on thin ice. Never sure when it was gonna crack beneath me.
It frustrated me to no end, both as a warrior and a commander. To see such foresight, such clever strategies emerging from the other side. Without the wisdom of our predecessors, I would never have been able to assess the situation. Hence why I again find myself here seeking knowledge.
You never failed to impress me, Rodrigue. All those years of experience, and you still have the drive to sit down and study tactics in your time off.
I merely despise the idea of defeat, nothing more. I lack the cunning of the Margrave. And unlike Lambert, I lack the overwhelming courage necessary to turn the tide of battle on my own. Which is why I must learn as many strategies as I can. It's the only way I can prevail over those both wiser and braver than I.
You know, you've said before that you and Felix don't have a whole lot in common. But I'm not so sure that's true. Neither of you miss a single chance to improve yourselves. Guess the apple really doesn't fall far from the tree. That goes for Dimitri, Sylvain, and yeah, even Felix. As for you, Rodrigue, I think all that hard-earned knowledge is exactly what makes you the incredible commander you are.
I'll spare you the humility and just accept the compliment. Thank you.
I bet you could even beat the Margrave or the former king if you took him on now.
I wouldn't be so sure. Both of them were far beyond my reach in their prime. And the Margrave aside, I could never hope to meet Lambert as equals. I'd struggle for an eternity without ever growing close to his might.
I guess you can't exactly catch up to someone when they're gone.
Perhaps not. But that's exactly why we must continue learning. To never stop reaching for those who seem beyond our grasp.
Gotcha. And I'm just gonna have to follow in your footsteps. I'll catch up to you before you know it, Rodrigue. Just don't go dying on me before I get the chance.
Is that so? Then I suppose I'll have to work even harder to give you a proper challenge.
Oh, yeah. You were looking for Keyhole's treatise, right? Let me go ask if anyone knows where it is.
Oh, will I really make it home next winter?